Poland is growing faster than its largest peers here in Europe. And on Poland Today, we'll meet people who've taken a bet on that growth and have made this their home. I'm David Kennedy, and today's guest is Fredrik Udd of Explore Markets, a Swede who's the founder of the company and spends his working day encouraging businesses to invest in this part of the world. Fredrik, welcome to Poland Today.
Thank you very much for having me here on your show.
Not at all, not at all. We've met socially.
Yep, we have.
But you're online a lot. Okay, I see your posts about things. And the big thing recently was the state visit. The Swedish King, Gustav, came to Poland. Now, I believe you shook his hand.
Yeah, it was my first time when I met him before, but I didn't shake his hand before, so that was my first time.
And what can a king do for business these days? Does it make a big impression on Poles that the royal family has come on a visit?
I mean, I think a state visit is the biggest type of visit that can be made, and the Swedish king and queen, they do 2 of those per year right now. They are a little bit older, and they chose to come to Poland this year. I think that's a very clear statement that Poland is important for Sweden, and the Swedish-Polish relations are very, very important right now. And can they do something? I think that certainly that they can do something. But not only is it a sign of the importance of the relation, but also they brought with them more or less 65 Swedish companies, the biggest ones, but also SMEs, who had discussions with Polish companies, who had the big program over 3 days in Poland. So I think that's something that the king and queen, they are sort of figures that makes this type of visit much more important, much more interesting, and it can also attract the right counterparts on the Polish side.
Well, exactly. It's something that the Polish media was definitely talking about. And as you mentioned, it wasn't just the king, but there were also major investors, the Wallenbergs, for example, from Investor AB. That must be one of the biggest sources of funding. And although they don't directly invest in Poland, they're indirectly here in a great capacity, aren't they?
Yeah, they actually do invest directly through their company EQT, which is the second largest private equity fund in the world. And they also have a number of holdings in some of the major Swedish companies who are present on the Polish market since many years and who are investing a lot of money on the Polish market. And I think quite interesting to look at Swedish companies on the Polish market. The Swedish Embassy commissioned a report, a research the last year, and out of more than 700 Swedish companies that are present on the Polish market, they found one of the findings were that they reinvest most of their profits, so 93% of the profits in the Polish market. So I think that's actually remarkable in an international context, but it's really a sign that Swedish companies believe in the Polish market and they see a bright future on the Polish market.
And the kind of the shape of that investment has changed because, I mean, we saw things like bus manufacturers who have maybe moved their production somewhere else, but they have their back office here in Poland. Is that the kind of change that we're seeing in this environment?
I think in general, the large companies, they reshuffle their footprints a little bit. But I think that overall, most companies do more of everything in Poland when it comes to Swedish companies, and not only the large ones, which have been here for many years. So like Ericsson, they celebrated an anniversary of more than 100 years in Poland last year as well. And so lots of Swedish companies have a long history in Poland. But now also many Swedish SMEs are focusing on the Polish market. So I think more of that is happening right now.
And that's what you're kind of focusing on in your business. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, we are working more with SMEs, helping them to expand internationally in Poland, Central Eastern Europe, and the Nordics. That's our main focus. And we're also working with M&A advisory, so helping out with cross-border transactions as a tool in the toolbox to grow.
Now, you must have seen a lot of changes in Poland over those years. But first of all, I mean, when we look at Poland historically and Sweden, there was a time when you weren't such great pals, shall we say, back in history. You look at every castle had some, Swedish invader who knocked it down and then it was built again. But that has changed. It's not the invader. It's maybe in some ways a kind of an older brother in terms of investment. Would you say that?
I certainly think so. I think the dark days of the Swedish-Polish history is quite far behind us. Since then we have had common kings. We have shared a lot of the history in a very positive way. And for instance, the Swedish-Polish Chamber of Commerce, where I'm vice chairman,
of course,
it was founded in 1929, so that's almost 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. And over the 20th century, the chamber was very important. It was instrumental in bringing Swedish companies to, especially the Poznan Trade Fair in those days, and it was a representative there. So that was sort of a very important way for Swedish-Polish relations.
Right, so even back in communist days, then the Swedish knew how to do business with Poland.
Yeah, and you can see IKEA as a proof of that as well, that during the 20th century, IKEA built a strong relation with Poland, and it was the most important country for IKEA.
Well, probably a lot of people don't actually know about that, but of course, Poland was a manufacturing base for IKEA even in the 1970s, wasn't it?
Yeah, Poland was the largest manufacturing country for IKEA until somewhere in the 2000s, so until more or less 20 years ago, when China surpassed in manufacturing volumes. But until then, Poland was the most important manufacturing hub for IKEA.
Right, so it's that kind of, shall we say, long-term understanding that Swedish companies have of the Polish market and have probably adapted to that. I remember when I came here, basically the beginning of the 90s, there was already, for example, a big IKEA in the middle of the city centre. Now, of course, there are other retailers, as we say in this business, but that was something which my friends, for example, in Scotland were jealous of. And I didn't realize that those links had gone back that far. But in terms of the future of Swedish investment here, one of the things that was mentioned was the stock market and what has maybe been a successful way that Swedish companies have been able to gain more maybe from their stock market than the Poles are currently getting in terms of getting private investment from private people.
I think that's quite interesting, and I think the Swedish philosophy has been a little bit different. In Sweden, we have seen that the growth is going to be driven and fueled a lot about the innovation of the companies in the country. And in order to have that innovation happen, you need to have a well-functioning capital market. So, and one way of doing that is to try to fuel as much money as you can and make the capital markets and the stock market accessible for both pension and investment funds, but also for private capital, so individuals. So investing in the stock market has sort of been democratized in Sweden for many years, and we have a long tradition of individuals investing in the stock market, no matter what background they have. But most Swedes have a history of investing in investment funds, especially, but also in some stocks. So that's something that's I think is important. And if you compare the Swedish stock market with many other stock markets, we have a higher activity and larger stock market in compared to the economy than most other economies.
So the development of the stock market should go in what direction? Giving more, shall we say, more power to investors, or encouraging private individuals to invest more? And how do you do that in that kind of case?
One thing is, of course, to try to fuel the pension funds and investment funds to the stock market to drive that. And then also to build awareness, sort of some type of education among people. And one thing that's happening right now that's going to be introduced in Poland this year is a savings form that's, if you would translate it, it's called something like an investments savings account. That is a way of saving without having to pay profit on all of your gains that you do on a regular basis, but instead you pay a percentage of your entire capital that you have there, a very small percentage.
All right. So if over the year you get 25% profit on one thing, but you lose 5% on the other, then you're not taxed on that profit on the 25%.
No, exactly. And you're actually in Sweden, the tax rate depends on the interest rates in the economy, the ones that are governed by the central bank. But right now you pay around 1% tax on your holdings, on your stock holdings.
Okay, so that really does encourage people to take a flutter, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. So that encourages people to save more, and it's a very good way to save.
And there's also this thing about preferential shares that say for example, you've got a family business and you decide you're going to go onto the stock market. In Sweden, it's a kind of maybe a better route for those kind of companies because of having a greater say in the company, even although it's on the stock market?
Yeah, I think the difference, now this is not my field of expertise, but I think the main difference is that preferential shares are quite common in Sweden, and they can also be traded on the stock market. So it provides liquidity also to those families that are holding preferential shares.
Right. Okay. So in many ways, it is kind of making it a little bit easier, and also maybe less of a risk for those companies that go onto the stock market as well.
Yes, certainly, and it's I think for many founders, you still want to control. You want to control your business. You don't want to have the risk of losing it. At the same time, you want to be able to use your ownership to attract new investors. Maybe you want to sell some part of your ownership at some point. So I think this is good for founders, definitely.
Now, another very important aspect of the change that we've all seen in relations between Poland and its neighboring countries is, of course, what's happening in Ukraine. And this has brought Poland and Sweden very much closer together, as of course Sweden has now joined NATO, and the relationship with Poland has therefore changed as well in that way, hasn't it?
It certainly has, and I think a sign of this is that Sweden and Poland signed a strategic cooperation agreement between our prime ministers, who signed it in November 2024, so a little bit more than 1 year ago. And the reason for that being that we share the same values, we face the same threats and challenges. The security around the Baltic Sea region is a priority for both countries. So this was a way to build our joint efforts, or to join our efforts in an even stronger way. But it's not only about defense and security, but it's also, as you mentioned, Ukraine, our joint support. We share the same values. We both support Ukraine 100%. And then it's also about the economic development and cooperation between the two countries. So it's a quite holistic agreement that was signed.
And in terms of zlotys and crowns, what does it mean in terms of new business being done between the countries in the defence field? Not your field, I know.
No, I cannot recall the exact amounts of all deals that are happening, but for instance, just a couple of months ago, just before Christmas, there was an announcement that Poland choose Swedish submarines for the new Orca program, which is it's a huge investment, and it's going to be a vehicle for common development in defense between Sweden and Poland. There are also numerous other defense and security investments between the countries. So I think that's, and last week during the state visit, there were also agreements signed between our two countries and the companies within the two countries. So
and that will go both ways, because Poland is obviously a big manufacturer of arms as well, particularly even things like shells and bullets and things like that.
Yeah, it will definitely go both ways. So I think it's an important cooperation for both countries.
Fantastic. Now, in terms of the last period that you've been here, which year was it exactly that you came?
The first time I came was in 2002, so it's...
So you're a newcomer.
Yeah,
a newcomer.
I'm a newcomer, but still it's a totally different planet now than what it was back then. And I feel quite privileged to have experienced this development of Poland.
So what's changed since then? I mean, imagine if you arrived at the airport in Warsaw in those days.
The memories from them are still very, very strong. And I remember how I touched down at the airport in Warsaw. The airport was not as modern as it is today. And you could feel everything from the quality of the asphalt, where it was almost melting. It was very, very soft. And during this warm summer day, the terminal buildings were very old. The roads that you were driving back then were not very safe.
Of course. And when you touched down, everybody clapped.
Yeah, they did. But I think they still do sometimes.
Sometimes, but not quite so much.
Not quite as often. No.
So it was almost in those days as if, my goodness, the tarmac's not that great. Well done, pilot.
Yeah. And I also remember I came for a project in the chemical sector. I was working for a global company that had acquired a paint factory in a Polish town called Wrocław, which is not that well known for many people.
Not really. Quite good at basketball in Wrocław.
But a medium-sized Polish town of around 100,000 inhabitants. This was 2 years before Poland entered the EU, and it was almost a little bit depressing times. Very high unemployment, and most factories that used to be there had closed down because they were not profitable. So you could see factory buildings in ruins, and it was not the most positive moments.
Okay, but do you still go back to Wrocław? Have you seen what it's like now?
I haven't been there for many years, but I plan to go back there and see what it is right now. But I think that all of Poland was going through a big transition back then, and I was there for 3 months. I moved to Poland 4 years later. During that period, Poland had entered the European Union, and I think it was the most dynamic time that I've experienced in Poland, when every day when you're walking around in Warsaw, other cities, you could see new stores opening, new restaurants and cafes, new buildings. Still some things not that great. The roads were still not amazing. Then I spent 4 years outside of Poland again and came back in 2011, just before Poland organized the Euro 2012, the football championships.
I remember that period.
There were huge investments in infrastructure, the airports, for instance, and the railroads and railway stations, the roads.
Yes.
So Poland has had these huge leaps of development during these 25 years I've been here, and so it's really interesting to have seen that and experienced that.
And what about the cultural differences between doing business in Poland and doing business in Sweden? What did you see back in those early days, and maybe what do you see now?
I think in those days it was more of the old school sort of way of doing business. I think it's much more modern, much more international.
So what
today.
do you mean? Give me an example.
No, especially the hierarchies were coming from Sweden, where we have very flat hierarchies. We have what we call consensus decisions. Everybody's, not everybody, but lots of people normally involved in decisions. That's something that international companies can feel is a bit frustrating sometimes. It takes time. But there's a flip side to that as well, that once a decision is made, everybody's on board. Implementations are much smoother. You rarely have the same type of delays that you might have in other countries, and also Swedish companies are very long-term in the decisions. So that was something that was a big difference back then. It's still to some extent, of course, you have higher hierarchies in Poland, but not as back then. But that's still a difference. I think there are many more similarities than differences when it comes to values and business cultures between Sweden and Poland. But still, it's important to think about these cultural nuances.
And how do you get around these cultural nuances? Are you aware that there is Pan Prezes, the Mr. Chairman of the company, and affect that, or do you try and reach out in a Swedish way to the people around him, or how do you manage in those kind of
I think
situations?
You always need to think about those differences. You always need to. I tell Swedish companies and other international companies that when there is, but especially Swedish companies, where you might have a project manager who has a lot of responsibility and can take large decisions. They might have a big budget. But if you're coming as a project manager to Poland, you're unlikely to be able to meet the right decision making here. So I tell Swedish companies, make sure to match the level of people who are coming to Poland with the people that you want to meet. So I think that's one thing that's it might not be the case all of the time, but quite often it's important to do that in Poland.
Okay, so that kind of idea of send the chairman, even if it's just once, to meet the Polish chairman, for example.
Yeah, certainly. I think it's that also shows that you are dedicated. You're thinking about the Polish market seriously, because otherwise that might be the case that the Polish counterparts don't think that you're really that serious about the Polish market. It's not that important to you. It's a peripheral market, and so why should they invest their time if you're not investing your time?
So occasionally send the king as well.
I think it doesn't hurt to send the king to that. Then you really show that you're serious about the market.
Okay, and I was asking Tony Hausch when he appeared on the program, what was that kind of pivot moment in Polish growth? What would you say was the pivot? What really changed things?
I think it's really difficult to say that there was just one pivot moment, but I think obviously that when Poland became a market economy, that was something that fueled everything for the time to come.
Because in Sweden, you're thinking back to relations from 1929, so you exactly, already knew how to do business.
Yeah. We were here a long time before and even back in the medieval times, we were here as we were talking about. But I think that if you look at the Polish growth curve, it's been very stable. So I think that's something to remember, that we have it's been a very good development of the country for many, many years. But of course, the EU accession, I think that has been extremely important for the Polish economy. I think that opened Poland even further and made everything much easier in Poland. So I think that's definitely a point in time that's pivotal for Poland.
Fantastic. And you also, we've been talking about how now Polish companies are growing into Sweden, realizing that they have the skills and maybe the ingenuity sometimes to impress on that market as well.
Yeah, I think that if Poland used to be important for Sweden, and it still is, I think that Sweden has become more and more important for Poland and Polish companies. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One is that Polish companies have been more mature when it comes to international expansion. They have sort of the mindset now to conquer the world. And they're looking for international markets where they can expand, because they have already outgrown the domestic markets. In some cases, it's difficult to grow further here. so then you have the options of which market should we look at, and the German economy has not performed that well over the past 5 years. Markets to the east are not the same option as they used to be. Russia, Belarus closed down. Ukraine, we have a big war. So then the Nordics and the going north is a quite attractive opportunity and possibility for Polish companies. And Sweden, of course, as the sort of the biggest market in the Nordic region, is quite frequently an attractive option.
An attractive option. And what would you say to those companies or even individuals who it's become kind of almost fashionable to knock the UK and knock Sweden, that, it used to be so good, but things have changed now and it's not the same country. Would you agree with any of that? Would you say that Sweden is refocusing and rebuilding, or are you just glad that you're over in Poland?
I think that Sweden is still doing really, really well. I think that the Swedish, no matter if you look at the economic growth, or if you look at innovation, standards of living, many things, Sweden is still performing really well. So I think the country is still in a good shape. Of course, there are some areas which are not doing that great, but I think the country as such is doing pretty well.
And what could Poland and Polish businesses be teaching Sweden these days?
I think when people ask me about why has Poland developed so well, I think that a lot of it is the mindset and the drive that Poles have, so the sort of entrepreneurial spirit. I think that's something that sometimes lack in Sweden. So people are getting a little bit fat and happy sometimes. So I think that having that sense of urgency, the awareness that you can actually change things and you can influence your own future and your prosperity by the actions that you're doing. I think that's something that definitely can be taught by.
A more level playing field, would you say, these days in Poland?
Between Poland and Sweden?
Well, between Poland and Sweden, but in terms of, the possibilities, they used to talk about the American dream. And is there the Polish dream you're talking about, that entrepreneurs have that kind of drive and they can get somewhere?
Yeah, I think that everybody has the possibilities to do something in Poland. I think definitely that many have done it as well. So I think that has shaped and it has fueled the Polish development, certainly.
But you're here to stay.
I'm here to stay, for sure. I'm not going anywhere. I think that if you look at the development and that Poland has gone through, and you look into the future, is it likely to develop the same way? Probably not, but I think it's going to continue to develop really well over the years to come. So I think it's a great place to be.
Well, I'm sure that many of the people who are watching are pretty glad that you're here, that you're offering a helping hand. Fredrik Udd, thank you very much for joining me on Poland Today.
Thank you very much, David.
Good to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
Thank you. And that's all we have for the moment, but we're going to be meeting more people over the next few weeks who have made a success of their time here in Poland. That's all for now.